Hello, welcome. We'll discuss the third part of our book, Human Relations, by Seneca. Since it deals with human life, I hope you have been following along, reflecting on it, and seeking to apply it in your own life. I always recall what Helena Blavatsky says that a book, in fact, a reading, truly begins when you close the book. That is when you begin to digest it and truly apply it. And today is no different. We are going to discuss a very interesting topic, but also a profound one. Seneca will talk about death. In several letters addressed to Lucilius, since we are precisely in this work, letters to Lucilius, in many of these letters, he addresses the subject of death. First, Lucilius faces the fear of his own death, then the loss of a friend, and later, illness. In other words, various situations in which Seneca guides him on how to conduct himself. I hope you enjoy it. Just as a reminder, reviewing the background of our friend Seneca mentioned this every time he was born in 4 BCE, and he will die in 65 CE. Sentenced to death by Nero, the very one he had mentored. He was Nero's tutor. At a certain point, Nero turns against his mentor and even orders his execution. He slits his own veins in a bathtub until he dies. But before that, throughout his lifetime, which was actually quite long, considering the historical period in which he lived, when longevity was uncommon, he left behind profound lessons of wisdom. He belonged to what we called a Stoic school, a philosophical tradition deeply focused on moral teachings. And therefore, it remains highly relevant and useful for our times. It is no coincidence that Stoicism has been making such a strong comeback. So, to recall, Seneca is part of the triad of great philosophers. The Stoics of Rome, which includes Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. They form the golden triad of Roman Stoicism. Well, what else should we remember? He wrote 124 letters and 12 dialogues. He wrote 9 tragedies, meaning he was a highly active writer, leaving behind a vast body of work and a wealth of knowledge, although some of his writings have indeed been lost. A 13th dialogue was lost. Some of his letters were also lost, but fortunately, a significant portion of his work has reached us today. Shall we continue? Remember that * Human Relations is a collection of letters to Lucilius, divided into 4 parts. We have already discussed friendship, as well as books and eloquence. Today, we will talk about the wise person and their attitude toward death. In other words, the advantages of wisdom in the face of death. He presents some of the ideas he himself uses to face the concept of death and illness, offering consolation through them. So, let's begin. He starts off right at the beginning, in the first letter to Lucilius. The first letter that Lucilius writes to him, we know this from the response, because we do not have the original letter that was sent, only the one he received. It seems that Lucilius was undergoing some legal proceedings initiated by enemies who were persecuting him. He feared many things: exile, death, imprisonment. And his distress prompts Seneca to respond by addressing this fear, questioning why he feels this way. Why does he fear these things when they are entirely bearable for a man who is in control of himself? And Seneca is about to say something truly fascinating. Everyone, this in particular. I found it very beautiful. It almost serves as a seal, a stamp proving that he was truly an excellent philosopher, because this is truly the nature of a philosopher. He says that nothing consoles him more, and nothing serves as a better remedy for him than ideas. Good ideas, solid ideas, well-founded ideas. They eased all fear and alleviated all pain. It is precisely these therapeutic ideas that he will recommend to Lucilius in his letters. So, he says, it is foolish to be unhappy today just because one day you might be unhappy. That seems so logical, doesn't it? The idea of duality has been present since we arrived in this world. Marcus Aurelius, another historical figure, speaks a lot about this. We know that the world is dual. There will be rain and sunshine, good and evil, heat and cold. Duality is embedded in the very structure of life. The manifested world is dual. Therefore, when you step into the world, you must understand that there will be difficulties, there will be betrayals, There will be morally painful moments. There will be physically painful moments. There will be moments of loss, and there will be moments when you come close to facing your own mortality. Therefore, this is to be expected. Now, imagine that as you face the script of life where both this and its opposite will occur, meaning both the luminous and the most painful experience is knowing the script, you begin to suffer in advance. You have condemned your life to not being dual, to being only one thing pain, all the time. And it is fear that is capable of doing this. Life, which was dual and had pleasant, good, and constructive moments, suddenly became entirely dark because one day it'll suffer. He teaches Lucilius that this is not how one should face life. You take precautions, you prepare yourself for both circumstances, but you do not spend your entire life suffering in advance for what is yet to come. That is sheer folly. Those who live like this do not truly live. They are prisoners of fear. Keep moving forward, he will say. If you want to banish your anxieties, consider that all your fears will certainly come true. Imagine something like that, every single one of your fears coming true. I often joke about this. When I first started driving, this is a true story. It really happened, and I have shared it many times in my lectures. In fact, I was terrified of driving. One fine day, I started thinking, why am I so afraid of driving? At the speed I drive, what kind of major accident it'll possibly cause? Maybe running over a turtle, at most. I came to the conclusion that my real fear was that people would think I was a bad driver. Oh, is that the fear? Leave it to me. I stood in front of the mirror and told myself, you drive badly, you drive badly, you drive badly, you are a terrible driver. Got it? Got it. If someone says that, it's simply the truth, right? That's right. And then I went out on the road without fear. The person shouted, Barber, that's right. That's it. Epictetus himself, another historical philosopher, has a quote that I find very amusing and insightful. He says, if someone speaks of your flaws, if you hear that they have pointed out your flaws, you should respond. That person doesn't know me that well, because otherwise they wouldn't mention just those flaws, they would mention many others. That is a fact. Well, accepting loss this is the advice I followed. At the time when I started driving, realizing that the loss wasn't a big deal and that I could perfectly well live with it, gradually took away my fear. Because fear is precisely that looming threat. But if you respond by saying, if this happens, I'll endure it well, it'll be fine. Then, the next day, you start again without any problem. You start undermining fear's arguments, which is exactly what he recommends here for Lucilius. Think about it, fear says, this will happen. And you respond, will it? So what? It'll start over again. What's the problem? Ah, but you will go through this situation. Yes, I will. I am prepared for it. I have already prepared myself. Hope for the fairest outcome, but be ready for the most unjust one. It's more or less the same idea. I prepare myself for things to unfold in the fairest way possible. But it may happen that they don't. There are many factors influencing human life. What the Indians called a law of karma. Many things interfere in an individual level, a collective level, and a personal level. All that can influence the future, including things that are not present right now, things that will still happen along the way, and that will change the course of events. Therefore, I hope, because I trust in nature, that justice will prevail. Thank you. But when will it prevail? I don't know. Maybe today, maybe someday. But am prepared for both situations. If justice prevails now, good. If it does not, I do not stop trusting in the laws of nature. And I was already expecting this. In other words, it reminds me a lot of what Jung once said, that if we'll turn our backs on problems, they do not cease to exist. They simply catch us from behind. So we must face them. Problems exist. When they come, I already know what they are. I will not be caught by surprise, nor will I be taken from behind. This is not a tragedy. It is simply part of life. Despite all this, is life still worth living? Yes, because no one truly wants to die. So let's embrace the part that makes life worthwhile. And let's live it in the best way possible. Continuing, he goes on to say, there is nothing so terrible in life except fear itself. Therefore, it is not only people but also things that must remove their masks and reveal their true faces. Antonio says it's not just about removing our own masks to know ourselves, but also about unveiling the masks of life's events. Because fear also disguises things. And what if they think that about you? All right, they already have. And now, what's going to happen? Nothing, nothing at all. That's just how it is. All right, I can handle that just fine. But what about something else? You might, I don't know, lose your possessions. If I lose my possessions, can I live well without them? Can I survive well? You can survive. Will I die the next day? No, you won't. You'll keep on living. So, it's not that serious. It's not that serious. You can survive just fine with that. So, removing the masks is not just about ourselves, not just about people, but also about events. That is important. Do you realize today that you are threatened by death, exile, or suffering? Did you realize today, Lucilius, that you are threatened by death, by exile, by suffering? Well, but isn't it natural to face such misfortunes? This is a typically Stoic thought. Why did we come into this world? Was it not to smooth out our rough edges in order to grow? To align ourselves more with the human condition? To fulfill nature's plan for humankind? We did not come here for anything else. So now, at this point, because Lucilius, according to him, was already a mature man, perhaps only slightly younger than him. At this stage of life, are you surprised that misfortunes exist? Isn't this already part of the conditions of the contract of life, something we should have understood by now? We came here to grow, and in order to grow, we will face difficulties. This is very logical. Therefore, do not be surprised by the expected conditions of life. We die a little every day, as each day a part of our life is taken from us. He says, look, death is not in the future. Death shares today with us. Today, with each passing minute, it takes things into the past. They no longer belong to us. In other words, we die every day not with the last grain of sand that empties the hourglass, but with all those that have fallen before. Do you not understand? The hourglass is there, with the grains falling. When the last one falls, it is not that final grain that caused your death. It was all the grains that fell before that led to your passing. Therefore, you must be prepared to value each and every grain. Death is not the last grain. Each one, as it falls, announces death. He says the recklessness or madness of men is such that some are driven to death by the fear of death. They are so afraid of dying that this fear turns into anxiety, a serious issue that today we call neuroses and many other conditions which prematurely destroy life. And it can even develop into a fear of feeling fear itself, which is panic the worst possible state for survival in any circumstance. In other words, either we understand that. In fact, Greek mythology speaks of something very similar. It says that when we'll see the world with our first breath, our first glimpse of light, Zeus turns our hourglass. In other words, we begin to die the moment we are born. And if we embrace this understanding of our daily coexistence with death, we begin to value every tiny grain of our life even more. Each day, each moment becomes infinitely more precious. And we realize that we must live each experience with both body and mind fully engaged, reflecting, savoring what life offers us, learning from it, and using these experiences to continuously trace the path back to our true selves. Either you live as life demands, or you have already died. A part of you let me die in vain. In truth, what makes life eternal is giving it meaning. Every grain of sand that we let slip away without learning anything, without growing as human beings, is a grain of our life that does not reach eternity because we gave it no meaning. That is why Emperor Marcus Aurelius, also a Stoic, said that we should take death as our advisor. It tells us what we should be doing today if we were to die tomorrow. Therefore, we must fill all our days with meaning. Whatever our physical condition may be, we must preserve both courage and joy. A good pilot continues to navigate even when the sails are torn. This is very interesting. He mentions that he was visiting an ancient historian, a friend of his father, who was already very old, at death's door, and fully aware of it. He saw his physical limitations becoming increasingly pressing, more and more restrictive, yet he remained joyful and continued doing the best he could with the resources he had left. And he is very impressed because this is not someone who was suddenly struck by death. It is someone who sees death slowly approaching, day by day. And yet, he continues to live with joy and serenity. He said that facing death consciously, savoring it moment by moment in this way, and maintaining a good sense of humor is like a sailor who has fallen into a storm. The sails are torn, and yet he continues to steer his boat as best as he can, joyful, happy with the resources he still has. And when there are no more resources left, well, then it's over. My participation in this world stage comes to an end. It is marked. It is limited, and we have known this since the moment we were born. But as long as I am able to navigate, I will sail in the best way possible with what nature has granted me. Notice how this closely resembles another Stoic thinker, Epictetus, whom I also greatly admire. Epictetus spoke precisely about the importance of giving your best according to the resources that life grants you, and that this, in itself, would be happiness. Because resources will always be limited. They always have been, and they always will be. All the resources of the universe will never be in our hands at the same time. In other words, with what life has given you, do your best. It will always be limited. It is a profound lesson, Lucilius, and one that requires a long journey of learning to depart serenely when the moment is inevitable. In other words, it takes a long process of learning to know how to leave peacefully. This requires a deep understanding, learning to die a little each day of our lives. That passage I have already mentioned to you. I am not afraid of death. Do you know why? Because she was my intimate friend. Every day, something in me dies, and every day, something new is reborn. A part of my physical body fades, some cells wear out, but also a level of consciousness passes away. And it'll keep rising, little by little. Therefore, she is my intimate friend. She has walked with me my entire life. Why should I fear her? So, to depart serenely, he will say that it is fundamentally about having one's house in order. In other words, whenever death comes for me, I'm at peace. What did I do today? I lived a day as a human being. Everything is in its place. Everything is settled. I have done all that was mine to do. I have given all the right responses. I do not have the urgency of unresolved debts. No, if I were to die, I wouldn't need to talk to anyone. I wouldn't have to resolve all outstanding issues. No, my conscience has already guided me to resolve those matters. Life itself has already directed me. I didn't even need death as a reason to do so. Therefore, if I had to die now, my life would have already been worthwhile. I have lived a day as a human being. I have lived many days as a human being. And just one of those days is enough to justify an entire life. This peace of conscience, this serenity, should be a goal that accompanies us every day. So that on any day you might fall, you would do so with a clear conscience, at peace, and in harmony with both heaven and earth. It reminds me a lot of a poem by a Mexican poet whom I deeply admire, Amado Nervo, where he speaks about this very idea. Very near my sunset, I bless you, life. He expresses gratitude for everything life has given him and concludes by saying, life, you owe me nothing. Life, we are at peace. It is very beautiful. This poem is deeply Stoic. No one welcomes death with a smile, except for those who have long prepared for it. In other words, those who have embraced all that life offers with serenity. And death is a natural part of life. This serenity, this progressive wisdom of seeking to understand life's mysteries and being prepared for all that inherently belongs to it. And it is also inherent to life that, at a certain moment, one must die. In fact, if we look into Eastern traditions, it is said that life and death are merely two facets of the greater life, which continues. For those familiar with this Indian example about the dolphin, an observer watching both the air and the sea would see the dolphin appear in the air when it leaps. Then it dives into the water and continues to live beneath the surface. Someone outside the water would say that the dolphin is alive now. When it is in the water, it is alive now, at the moment it enters the depths. But someone who could see both planes would realize that the dolphin is alive in both realms. and that it is simply a continuation of the greater life in two different states. And you will see that this is true. With these words, though not exactly the same, Seneca expresses the same idea here. He who refuses to die also refuses to live. It is logical because it is part of the whole package. Do you remember the contract you signed when you entered life? It wasn't even in the fine print. No, it was written in big, bold letters. It's part of the package. To live, to overcome difficulties, to rejoice in triumphs, to love the human condition, to learn everything that can be learned, to benefit all those who can be helped, and then to bid farewell to the stage with serenity and follow the path that the great life sets before you. It's part of it. And he who refuses to die also refuses to live. The certain events are expected. Only those things that are uncertain should be feared. He says, well, I expect misunderstanding, I expect illness, I expect death. None of this will make me suffer that much. There will always be some degree of pain, but not as much as if it had caught me by surprise. It is the unforeseen that truly causes us more pain, because it was not within our horizon of possibilities, and you have to improvise a response to a situation you had not anticipated at that moment. This is interesting because he says that as a person delves deeper into the mystery of life, the less they are surprised by anything. Oh, I was surprised because a friend betrayed me. Well, if you were a bit wiser, you would know that instability lives and reigns in most human beings, and that today they are their own friends, but tomorrow they may not even be friends with themselves. Today they are faithful to themselves, tomorrow they betray themselves. If they betray themselves, why wouldn't they betray you? And sometimes they are not even fully aware of it. They act this way because they cannot sustain living by their own ideas every day. So one day they uphold them, and the next they falter. One day they are victorious, and the next they are defeated by themselves. And this is the drama of the human condition. If you deeply understood human nature, this would not surprise you. Therefore, it would not cause you suffering. In other words, the unexpected is what hurts the most. But for a wise person, almost nothing is unexpected. This is the result of the learner's mindset of a wise person who walks through life, knowing and seeking to know more and more about the conditions of the path and everything they will encounter along the way. To never fear death, think about it constantly. Wow, how morbid. No, it's not morbid. Quite the opposite. Marcus Aurelius used to say, when you just talked about the stake death as a counselor, think about what you would do today if you were to die tomorrow. These things are not morbid. They are meant to give life its true value. Do you know why? As we've mentioned in several talks, awareness is born through contrast. In contrast between two colors, between two musical notes, you become aware of both. In the contrast between life and death, you become aware of what is truly valuable in life and what is not. To prevent you from wasting countless grains of sand from your hourglass without using them wisely. So, walking through life with the awareness of death enhances the value of life, intensifies its colors, gives it the human meaning it deserves, and prevents us from wasting it. Therefore, it is an excellent piece of advice. Death is not morbid, it is a part of life. The fear of death, however, is morbid. The day will come when we'll once again see the light. What seems to die merely changes form. We should depart with serenity, for we will have to return. Observe the cyclical return of certain phenomena. You will see nothing truly vanish in the universe, but rather all things decline and return alternately. This is nothing more than Seneca speaking of the eternal return. And, of course, it is also a way of referring to the idea of reincarnation. This will not surprise you if you know that Plato also speaks explicitly about this. If you look at a dialogue called The Republic and a chapter where he discusses the myth of air, you will find a lengthy description of this phenomenon, the return of man to life. Not as a belief, but as a deduction based on the observation of nature. Because we'll see that nature is an eternal return, and human nature is part of nature. Then he says, spring always returns. Ah, but you might say, they are different ones. The flowers are not the same as before. No, the bodies are different. What do you know about the essence of flowers? To be certain that they are not the same. In other words, bodies must indeed renew themselves because they are perishable. But what do you know about the inner nature of things? To be sure that it is not also returning, along with the spirit of spring and the spirit of the flowers. Could it not return together? Or is the spirit of spring nothing more than the union of the spirits of the flowers? Notice that this is a possibility to be considered. Continuing. In the face of the loss of a friend. Through tears, we do not surrender to pain, we merely express it. There comes a certain moment when Lucilius writes a letter, saying that he has lost a very dear friend. Friendship is highly valued by Seneca as something fundamental in a man's life. And when Lucilius tells him that he has lost a very dear friend, he responds, saying, "Look, I do not see why you still cry so much. Because crying does not reflect the true extent of your pain. Crying only announces to everyone else the magnitude of your suffering. Pain does not need to advertise itself so much." He even says, "Oh, fatal madness. We want a parade even in our pain." In other words, even our suffering ends up turning into vanity. We want everyone to see how much we are suffering. And he goes on to say, well, if you honor your friend and want to keep his memory alive as a way of paying tribute to him, you will not keep him in your memory only while you are suffering. That would be very unworthy of him. He deserves much more than that. That is what he will discuss further ahead. You grant your friend only a brief stay in your memory if he remains there only for as long as your pain lasts. He will also remain in your joy. He will also be remembered in your achievements. He will be remembered in your moments of solitude, in your moments of companionship. He will be remembered in all your moments, not just in times of sorrow. So, what purpose does pain serve? If it is to honor him, life honors him far better than pain ever could, and even more so than tears. Stop misinterpreting the blessings of fortune. From what he describes, it seems that Lucilius curses the fortune that so prematurely took his friend away. And then he says, stop misinterpreting the blessings of fortune. She took him back from you, but before that, she had given him to you. In other words, when you received this friend, it was fortune that granted him to you. It was fate, fortune, the Roman goddess Iona. In other words, when fortune gave you this friend, you did not give thanks. And now that she has taken him back, you resent her for it. Be fair with fortune. Learn to respect the cycles of life. Learn to respect what, in Egypt, Tahotep called the law of Ma'at, the laws of life. The Indian Dharma, the law of Ma'at in Egypt. And here, fortune. Fate, Bona Die, the good goddess, the one who governs the destiny of men. Regarding illness, here he speaks one of Lucilius' letters. It seems that he was announcing that he was quite unwell. And Seneca laments all of this, but he goes on to speak about survival, about how to face pain with dignity. He says the following: the simple act of living is, at times, an act of courage. The thoughts that brought me peace during illness had the effect of a remedy on me. In other words, the very act of living, being aware of all adversities, and being ready to face them with dignity already makes a conscious man truly courageous. And what comforted me the most in my pain? When he was ill, he recounts that, with his father, already very old, he had a disease, because Seneca, throughout his life, had fragile health. He suffered from an illness that left him skin and bones, extremely thin, and he endured so much pain that he wished to die. Then he says, what comforted me the most, more than any medicine, were ideas. And I believe this is the mark of a true philosopher. Every true philosopher, whether minor, moderate, or great, shares a common trait. They love ideas. Ideas are like guiding lights for them. Ideas soften pain. Ideas provide direction. They love ideas. There is something divine in true ideas, in these pillars, in these bastions that will pass through a long life's journey, illuminating us and marking our path. In other words, these ideas have been my greatest remedy. The consolations that moral reflections provide have a healing virtue. And everything that pertains to the soul is also beneficial to the body. In other words, these ideas instilled in me such a strong moral predisposition, such great resilience in the face of pain, because it is necessary to confront pain at this. Influenced my body. My body endured illness better because my soul was capable of facing pain. Because ideas bring solace, ideas mark the path, ideas guide you. Ideas, as we often say nowadays, are lights at the end of the tunnel. You do not get lost in the middle of the tunnel, no matter how painful it may be. You will die, but not because you are sick, but because you are alive. Therefore, do not let fear convince you that illness is the vehicle of your death. Life itself is the vehicle of your death. Illness may result in pain, it may lead to healing, or it may lead to death. Life will inevitably result in death. So do not let fear keep threatening you, as if illness adds a risk that you have not already lived with since the beginning. Even someone in perfect health can, at any given moment, die due to any other circumstance in life. If anything is uncertain, it is whether illness will bring you death at life, without a doubt will. Therefore, this is yet another reason not to fear illness so much. Why do the ignorant struggle to endure physical suffering? Because they are not accustomed to paying attention to the soul, being entirely preoccupied with the body. The wise cultivate a connection with the best part of their being, the divine part. As for the other part, which in its fragility never ceases to complain, they engage with it only as much as is strictly necessary. In other words, the ignorant have only one thing: their body. The pleasures of their body, the pains of their body, the well-being of their body. If the body is unwell, their consciousness has nowhere to escape. Their consciousness has not cultivated any other internal space where it can leave this suffering vessel and find one in which it is at peace. Therefore, they suffer more than anyone and fear more than anyone. As a person advances in self-knowledge, they come to understand various other planes, subtle ones, that can be very peaceful, can feel very well, and can serve as an excellent refuge when the body is unwell. Then you will notice, even in our historical context, how, for example, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, while in prison, was deeply inspired and created the core of his work, or how Giordano Bruno, the philosopher, standing at the threshold of being burned at the stake, still remained integral, inspired, and full of brilliant ideas. How do these individuals achieve this? Their consciousness does not reside in just one room. Their dwelling had many rooms. This, of course, reminds me of Teresa of Avila. There were many rooms within that dwelling. They could escape from a body burdened with complaints by focusing on another plane, one that continued to offer them fulfillment, happiness, and well-being. Ignorance confines us to living in the only room of our human existence. Everything depends on the idea we have of things. Take Manuel Bandera, for example, addressing pain by defining what it is. It's nothing serious. Let's be patient. It's almost over. This is beautiful because it also appears in various mythologies, which state that when you know the name of your enemy, even in India, when you know the name of your enemy, when you name that which you struggle against, you gain power over it. Therefore, you have a much greater chance of overcoming it. India even taught that knowing the name of the divine brings you closer to it. The deepest name, the most profound identity of things. In other words, when you name pain, look, it's just an accident of my body. It will either be very intense, but if it is very intense, it won't last long, or it will be mild. If it is mild, it is bearable. Therefore, there is no reason for it to terrify me so much. It is merely the discomfort of the body, which is already passing, will soon be over, and another adventure will come for my consciousness. If I perceive it as something unbearable and eternal, it shatters all possibilities of remaining conscious and fighting for life. So one must name the pain. It is nothing so serious. Look at how many people in humanity are suffering more than this. Thinking about the pain of others, about their struggles, is also important. Look at how many good things I have already done in life. How am I strong enough to overcome this? It is necessary to fight with all one's strength against pain. The athlete overcomes pain and endures everything for the love of glory. If we overcome, our crown will be virtue, moral strength, and ultimate peace, if fortune so decides. Observe what an interesting example he provides. An athlete is a citizen who suffers constantly, even during training. During competitions, they suffer even more. And why do they endure all this pain with such dignity, all this suffering? Because they seek victory, they seek glory, they seek the podium. Do you seek possession of your own soul? Do you seek possession of your own conscience? And yet, you are not willing to endure pain for such a reward. Another endures it for a crown of laurel. And you cannot endure it for the crown of virtues, which is far more valuable. In other words, it is possible to endure pain. What you may be lacking is motivation. Perhaps this crown of virtues does not seem like such a great reward to you. Then one must seek wisdom, one must expand their consciousness, for in doing so, they position themselves correctly. To face either a painful period or a definitive one, should fate so decide. For both am prepared. He will say, it must be said, precisely at the most painful moment, to tell oneself, perhaps one day I will look back on this with disdain. Perhaps I will come to see that all of this, which at this moment I found so harsh, was not so harsh after all. Either through the experiences of life as a whole, or because other, more subtle pains make this physical pain seem less like the greatest of all pains. I remember someone who once spoke with me and told me that when they had their first child, they had a conversation with their mother. A student from many years ago. She spoke with her mother and asked, "Mother, is there anything more painful than giving birth to a child?" And her mother replied, "Yes, my daughter, there is. It is losing a child. That is far more painful." She had lost a child, and she reflected on that and came to the conclusion that it was indeed true. Psychological pain hurts more than physical pain. And perhaps, looking back in the future, you might say, it wasn't as dramatic as it seemed. My immaturity and my fear made it seem worse than it actually was. Who knows? Who knows? It is one of life's possibilities. The pain took over your body, but not your soul. Think about the virtuous and courageous acts you have accomplished, the meaningful roles you have upheld. In other words, all the good things you have done in life. Imagine that some people, when facing death, seek a point of support, something good they have done, some benefit they have brought to the world, but they cannot find it. But you have many, you are privileged. You carry yourself with pride and dignity in the face of pain. If suffering is necessary in the face of death, if dying is inevitable, it is because your life was not in vain. Instead of pitying yourself, have compassion for those who have no point of support. Nothing to anchor their conscience when confronted with the urgency and immediacy of death. So, there are many ways to focus on other elements that make pain seem less overwhelming. In this way, your support grows significantly. You can always rely on your spirit, even when immobilized by pain. You can teach, listen, learn, question, use your memory, and engage all the attributes of your spirit even if confined to a bed. Your spirit can expand far beyond the limits imposed by your body. It is interesting to realize that every time we are able, in the midst of pain, to think, "I'll go through this in such a way that I can teach someone, so that if this person ever experiences the same pain, they will suffer less than I did. Therefore, I will turn this pain into a lesson, and those who come after me will suffer less than I did because of the knowledge I will pass on. Because of my experience, others will suffer less." These are mental frameworks, but you may not realize how profoundly mental frameworks can impact the body. Take notice from time to time. It is good to practice some exercises. Imagine what is happening in your body. Visualize a pain you are feeling. Imagination, the power of the mind over our own body, is something truly fascinating. We influence ourselves for better or for worse. We have this power. Therefore, maintaining a positive mental attitude and grounding yourself in good ideas will help you rise above this intensity. We often drown in a glass of water because we make ourselves as small as the glass of water. If you see yourself as larger, you view the glass of water in perspective. You realize that while it may not be ideal, it is no longer something you can drown in. It becomes too small for that. This happens when you reclaim your true human stature. Time adds nothing to a life dedicated to goodness. What a bold and beautiful idea. I feel deeply moved when I encounter ideas like this. In fact, let me tell you something. For a philosopher, discovering an idea is a true reward. And this is a beautiful idea. He says, and I repeat, time adds nothing to a life dedicated to goodness. A single day for a wise person is longer than the longest life for an ignorant one. In other words, what is our purpose in this world? To bring values into the world. To bring goodness into the world. To be vehicles. To be the flute through which music reaches the world. We'll see to be mediators so that values can reach the world. If we have been, if we were today, if we were yesterday, if we have always been, time will only grant us more opportunities to be. However, whenever it takes us, our duty will have been fulfilled. In other words, I came into contact with goodness, I was able to serve it, and through me, it manifested in the world. All right, then, my role has been fulfilled. Now, whether the stage of life was big or small, whether it was short or long, these are factors beyond my control. But I'm at peace. Time neither adds much to me nor takes much away, since the essence of what I came to do in the world, I have already done. And this idea is very comforting. In other words, for a wise person, a single day, one day, is worth more than an entire long life for many others. Therefore, time holds little power over the wise. They find eternity in a single moment, because in one moment they fulfill their human condition. They are capable of putting the fullness of their human potential into action. Therefore, that moment justifies an entire life. If there are more moments, I will do it again. If there are none, I have already delivered my message. Do you understand the depth of an idea like this? That is why fullness in a single moment justifies an entire life. The fullness of human values. The fullness of being and serving the world as a human being. Which is our role? Well, in any case, today we conclude with these ideas. I know they are very profound. And what I find most remarkable when you engage with an author of Seneca's stature, as I have mentioned before, is that he presents many ideas. These ideas bring an incredible richness to reading. They bring an incredible richness to life. Authors of this caliber are not so common in history. They are gems. Sometimes I reflect on this we have spoken about death, about life, during these moments we have shared together. Could we say that Seneca was alive or that he was dead? Look at how much life he was able to give us. Was he dead? From a medical perspective, there are several indicators that determine whether a human being is alive or dead. From a philosophical perspective, defining this is much more complex. It is a question that requires much more research and observation, because there are many other ways to live. So, thank you very much for sharing with me today in this beautiful moment of life with Seneca among us. A warm embrace to all.